Hello and welcome to another Magic Duels gameplay. Today we're taking a look at a black, red and green or Junt energy deck with a lot of the new cards from Revolt but also from Kaladesh. So we also have a bit of a +1/+1 counter sub-theme going on at the same time, so a lot of cool synergies to look forward to. So let's get started here with Walking Ballista, just a great card, especially in a deck with +1/+1 counter synergies. Can solve a lot of different problems, good early, good late. It's a mana sink, so just an excellent card all around. We also have a Greenbelt Rampager, which is kind of a strange card. You basically have to pay 2 energy to keep the Greenbelt Rampager in play, and you're forced to pay 2 energy if you have it. But if you can't pay the 2 energy, then you get to return the Rampager to your hand and get 1 energy for your troubles. So at the very worst, you can spend 3 green mana to have a 3/4, which is not bad. If you already have energy, then you get an undercosted 1 mana 3/4, and it can actually also generate energy, especially if you have an energy outlet that spends energy. You can use the Rampager in the late game for 1 green mana to make an energy, which is not bad in this deck. So a pretty versatile card and definitely a great inclusion in this deck. We're also playing Fatal Push. Great, cheap, efficient removal spell. Not much more I can say about this card. Then we also have Glints-Sleeve Siphoner, which is excellent as she both attacks pretty well thanks to Menace and generates card advantage if we spend 2 energy on our upkeep at the cost of 1 life, and she can really run away with the game if she isn't answered immediately. We're also playing Longtusk Cub, which is our preferred turn 2 play, as if we can connect with the Longtusk Cub once, then we start generating an incremental advantage every time, generating energy, putting +1/+1 counters on the Cub, which makes it then easier to connect again with the Cub, and then of course all the great synergies in the deck, with other cards that generate energy and cards that increase the number of +1/+1 counters, like of course the Winding Constrictor, which is probably the more important card in the deck here, as it both synergizes with energy counters and +1/+1 counters, as you get an additional 1 of each whenever you would get any of those. Can especially run away with the game in combination with a Longtusk Cub, as the Cub will generate an extra energy when the Cub hits, as well as getting an additional +1/+1 counter whenever you do use the Cub's ability. And then of course pretty much every card in the deck has either energy or +1/+1 counter synergies, so that makes the Winding Constrictor very important in the deck. Then we also have Voltaic Brawler as another aggressive 2-drop energy creature that generates energy when he enters the battlefield, and he can spend 1 energy when he attacks to get +1/+1 and trample, so that's a lot of power for just 2 mana. We're also playing Harness Lightning, which is an easy inclusion, great removal spell that synergizes very well with any energy card, since you can either use energy you already have stored up to take out bigger creatures, or if you're taking out a smaller creature, you will get some free extra energy that you can spend somewhere else. So just a great card. We also have Tireless Tracker to generate some more card advantage thanks to all the clues she generates, and of course also gets +1/+1 counters for those synergies. Then we also have Thriving Rhino, not the most exciting card, but does have synergies with both energy and +1/+1 counters, so gets 2 energy when he enters the battlefield, and we can spend 2 energy when he attacks to put a +1/+1 counter on it, so still not terrible stats for a 3-drop, and of course the synergies is why we're including him. We're also playing Aethersphere Harvester, which is a great vehicle, especially in an energy deck, since we get 2 energy when it enters the battlefield, and we can spend an energy to give it lifelink until end of turn, so that makes it especially valuable against other aggressive decks, since when we're in a racing situation, getting that 3 points of life gain thanks to lifelink can be very crucial, and of course it's only crew 1, so we can crew it with pretty much any creature in our deck, and 3/5 flyer for 3 mana is already very good stats by itself. Then we also have 2 more copies of Unlicensed Disintegration to round out our removal suite, and of course we do have a number of artifacts in the deck as well, like the Harvester and the Walking Ballista, to give us the artifact to deal 3 damage to the opponent that we can perhaps also redirect to a Planeswalker, so just another great removal spell. that's pretty much easier to cast in this deck than a double black removal spell like Murder or Grasp of Darkness. We also have Nissa, Voice of Zendikar to add another dimension to the deck, adding a Planeswalker that can also ultimate to generate card advantage, or she can minus to put counters on our creatures, which can also be great with a Winding Constrictor in play, of course. Then we also have Bristling Hydra, which is another card that has both energy and +1/+1 counter applications. Of course, great against any control decks, giving the Hydra hexproof until end of turn makes it very resilient against spot removal. Then we also have Verdurous Gearhulk, which is another great card by itself, also has +1/+1 counter synergies. Not much more we can ask for a 5-drop here. Then we also have Skysovereign Consul Flagship, another card that's great at dealing with smaller creatures and planeswalkers, as it will deal 3 damage to a creature or planeswalker when it enters the battlefield or attacks, and crew 3 should not be a problem since we do have some pretty large creatures in this deck. And then finally some more planeswalkers to round out the deck, Ob Nixilis to kill creatures and draw cards, and Nissa to make hasty 5/5 lands and maybe return some permanents from our graveyard to our hand. And then our mana base, we've got 1 swamp, 1 mountain, 3 forests, then a lot of dual lands, 2 Hissing Quagmire which can turn into a 2/2 Death Touch creature, 2 Smoldering Marsh, 2 Cinder Glade, 2 Woodland Cemetery, 2 Rootbound Crag, 2 Dragonskull Summit, then 3 Aether Hub, which is also great in any energy deck, and then also Evolving Wilds, which fixes our mana and goes well with Tireless Tracker. So the mana base is probably the only downside of this deck. It's not always super smooth since we are playing 3 colors, but the deck is mostly green and black, and we're just basically splashing red for Unlicensed Disintegration, Harness Lightning, and Voltaic Brawler. Of course, splashing for a 2-drop creature, not always the best idea, but it is super synergistic in the deck, so I think it's worth including him. So yeah, that's gonna do it for the deck part. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which unfortunately only has 1 land. This one I think is a keep. It's not great by any means, but it has lands and spells, so hopefully we find some other lands besides Aether Hub, since don't really want to be wasting our energy like that. Alright, Forest is actually perfect, so we get to play a tapped Marsh. Next turn we get to play a Cub, and then hopefully we can start connecting. Do have a Fatal Push to clear the way, as our opponent has Sylvan Advocate. That's fine, we have a Fatal Push to kill it, so we'd rather play the Cub next turn. And do we? No, we don't want to use the Aether Hub here, but maybe we have to start thinking about deploying the Aether Hub so we have the extra energy to perhaps pump the Cub. So next turn we could go push plus Ballista, or we could just play the Harvester pre-combat to give us extra energy for the Cub. Let's see if our opponent has removal for our Cub. They do. Fatal Push. And a Gnarlwood Dryad, just a 1/1 Death Touch, so can easily be answered by the Ballista, as long as our opponent doesn't have Delirium. So yeah, this is still fine. Next turn we have to decide if we want to play Harvester or Fatal Push. Since the Sylvan Advocate is not really a big threat yet, I would probably prefer to play the Harvester over Fatal Push plus Ballista. Let's play the Harvester here. And now we'll have plenty of energy also to give the Hydra hexproof should our opponent have more removal. And the Hydra also naturally blocks the Sylvan Advocate next turn. Liliana the Last Hope. Alright, so I'm happy I didn't play out the Ballista. And the Harvester also kind of can take care of Liliana by itself. opponent pluses. So there's an interesting tension here going on where if the Liliana dies, then we are helping our opponent with Delirium. So we kind of want to get the Ballista in play to deal with the Dryad before they get Delirium, so before we kill the Liliana. But at the same time we don't want to have the Ballista in play with Liliana, otherwise she can easily take care of the Ballista. We found Thriving Rhino, which is interesting, so we do have the option of just playing the Rhino plus a Fatal Push here, which I think might actually be slightly better than playing out the Hydra, since that means we get to attack with the Harvester this turn, and then next turn we have a Thriving Rhino attacking. Yeah, I think I'll go with the Rhino here. Keep up black mana, and we don't have to Fatal Push quite yet, so we can keep it up in case our opponent plays an even better creature. And I think I will use a lifelink here since we're already at 15. So I think the plan here is to let the Sylvan Advocate hit us, and then second main decide what creature to Fatal Push if they add any other creature to the board. Grapple with the Pasts, also a reason not to Fatal Push first. Let's see if they can get Delirium here. They have creature land instant, so no Delirium yet. So this could get interesting with the Walking Ballista here. So yeah, it doesn't appear like our opponent is gonna add another significant creature to the board, so I'm probably fine Fatal Pushing the Sylvan Advocate here. So we only take one, and no follow-up from the opponent, but they could be holding on to all sorts of removal spells like Grasp of Darkness or maybe another Fatal Push, even though they won't have Revolt for the Fatal Push. So if we want to, we could play the Constrictor and then attack with the Rhino, give it an extra +1/+1 counter thanks to the Constrictor, and take down Liliana, and also attack with the Harvester. And then we can still play the Ballista to take care of the Dryad. That actually seems pretty sweet. So let's play Constrictor first, and then the Ballista to get an additional +1/+1 counter. Opponent might still have a Grasp in response here on the Constrictor, but then we still get to crew with the Harvester. So I think the first thing we should take care of is the Dryad before the Liliana goes to the graveyard and our opponent gets Delirium. So that works. Now we get to crew with the Harvester and attack Liliana, and I think we do it both, just in case our opponent does have a Grasp of Darkness they want to use on the Rhino, and I will be putting some counters on our Rhino here. And of course he gets an additional one thanks to the Constrictor, so this turn went pretty well for us. And even if our opponent, let's say, has a Languish, we would still keep the Thriving Rhino. Sage is slightly annoying since it does take care of our vehicle, but our hand is still pretty good here. Land is excellent, so now we just get to demolish our opponent. So let's see how we want to distribute these counters. Probably just one on each of our creatures to get the maximum number of counters. And we could even use a Ballista here to take care of the Reclamation Sage to deal as much damage as possible. But I think we can just attack here and might as well pay some more energy. Does mean we don't have double green for the Bristling Hydra, so we might not be able to play the Hydra next turn. But we can still use the Walking Ballista's ability to add some counters, and that should be good enough to close out the game here. unless something strange happens here. So yeah, Winding Constrictor, pretty good as it turns out. Kalitas, also quite reasonable from the opponent. But they are still dead on board here, I believe, since we can just add another counter and then shoot down a Kalitas with the Ballista. Maybe if we attack with everyone they're also dead, but this makes it a little easier, I think. Alright. Attack with everyone. And we even had the Evolving Wilds to get a forest here for the Hydra. Alright, sweet, on to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which I don't think we can keep. Too many 4-drops and awkward lands. This one, kind of the same. 2 Aether Hubs is difficult to keep if you don't have any other lands. Alright, this one could work. We have a tapped Smoldering Marsh into Rootbound Crag into Longtusk Cub, and if the Cub survives, then we have a shot. Island from the opponents, so lands are also not great draws at this point. So I think we do still play the Crag here into Cub. So Island, usually not a color with a lot of creature removal, but they could easily have a second color here since they did use an Evolving Wilds. So hopefully it's not Mountain into Harness Lightning. Alright, so opponent with a Smuggler's Copter. In a blue-black deck, which is not usually the color combination where you see the Smuggler's Copter, so opponent likely on a blue-black artifact deck with cards like Tezzeret and Whirler Rogue. So here we don't have anything going on, but we can kind of bluff having a removal spell to take care of the Copter. So the longer we think here, the more our opponent might think we are holding up a removal spell rather than developing our board and maybe playing another creature. So that being said, I think now we can play a tapped Marsh. Could play the Aether Hub in case we draw another Aether Hub next turn to have that extra energy for the Cub. But getting the tap lands out of the way also has its value. And say go. And we're basically hoping that our opponent doesn't crew the Copter here, out of fear of maybe a Harness Lightning. Alright, Gifted Aetherborn, and yeah, our opponent's not attacking, but I guess they also just want to keep the Gifted Aetherborn on defense, so that's also a good reason not to crew. But I'm afraid we'll have to offer the trade here. So what we can actually also do is pump the Cub once, since that's gonna have to happen no matter what if we want to trade with the Aetherborn or the Copter. But then we can also play the Rampager to get some more energy in case our opponent does want to block with the Copter. We can make our Cub into a 4/4. So yeah, we have to play the Forest here into the Rampager once again. But I imagine our opponent will just trade the Aetherborn for the Cub. Which is fine. And then next turn, if we draw another cheap creature, we can go Rampager plus that other creature. Otherwise, we can also just play an 8/8 Verdurous Gearhulk, which blue-black might struggle with. Alright, we also have green mana, so that changes things, and another Aetherborn. It's actually quite annoying against our deck if we don't have our removal spells. And now our opponent's choosing to crew the Copter, so they probably weren't playing around the removal spell last turn, instead they just wanted to have their Aetherborn on defense. So an interesting deck from our opponent so far. Not entirely sure what the theme is, but their cards are certainly all very good. Could play the Gearhulk and then next turn, if our opponent keeps the Aetherborn on defense to try and block the Gearhulk, we can Fatal Push it and then also play the Rampager. And it is more mana efficient than playing Rampager plus Fatal Push here. So let's play the Aether Hub plus the Gearhulk. Put all the counters on itself. Opponent did also play a Hissing Quagmire, which could also potentially trade with the Gearhulk here. But our opponent does need another green mana in order to activate it. So hopefully no murder from the opponent. Instead we see Rogue Refiner, so yet another good card, but no particular synergy with the other cards. So might just be Sultai good stuff. And alright, now we do see a Glints-Sleeve Siphoner, so might be a small energy sub-theme. But we are definitely in trouble here, since there's a lot of creatures we should Fatal Push. Opponent discards Treasure Keeper. So they might maybe also have a Emerge sub-theme. And land is not what we needed here. So we can attack, our opponent's gonna block with the Aetherborn, we can Fatal Push it and still trample over for 8. But there's a small chance our opponent doesn't block. In which case we don't want to use a Fatal Push yet. And then we'll also play the Rampager. And I think it's okay to play another land. But I will hold one land in hand in case we find another Tireless Tracker. So they do get to draw a card off of the Siphoner, down to 11. So our best hope is to try and finish off our opponent with a giant 8/8 Trampler, maybe force them to keep back the Quagmire and trample over for 6. But if they find any decent removal spell, the Gearhulk is done for it, and then we're pretty far behind on board. So the Copter keeps getting in there. Let's see if the Siphoner also attacks. Does have Menace, so we can't block it with the Rampager. So the opponent does hit us for 5. So they might be holding back the Quagmire, or they might be holding onto an Emerge creature like Elder Deep Fiend that they want to emerge on our turn, which could very well be the case, since they did show us both a Rogue Refiner and Treasure Keeper, which both kind of go in an Emerge deck. Pulse of Murasa, another interesting one. Return a creature, gain 6, and they replay the Aetherborn, so yeah, we pretty much need running removal spells here. And another Aether Hub is not gonna do it. So we kind of flooded out pretty badly. And the Fatal Push as well. So now our opponent is outcarding us. And there's not much we can do about it. Our opening hand of Cub plus Gearhulk only found 2 other spells. Smuggler's Copter getting in there. Opponent getting aggressive. And we don't have any particularly good blocks available. But we also don't have any good top decks that can get us out of the situation, so we're basically dead on board. Treasure Keeper. And Winding Constrictor a little late to the party, but I don't think he would have made a huge difference. And there's Elder Deep Fiend. I was alluding to earlier, so our opponent kind of has it all. Tapping our lands, we could float it in response, but find a Fatal Push, which they could have cast, but they didn't have any good targets for it, of course. Can still play out our Winding Constrictor, just in case, but yeah, we're very much dead here. Alright, let's move on to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our hand, which only has the one land. And this one looks quite good. We have all our basics, which is always nice, not having any mana troubles. So we probably want to lead with a forest here, since we could also draw into maybe a Winding Constrictor we want to play. So if we play mountain first, then we don't have that option anymore. Up against blue-red with Alchemist's Vial, so could be a Sphinx's Tutelage deck, could be maybe an artifact deck. Either way, we're just gonna play out our creatures here. Question is, which creature do we play? Found a Rampager, which is a turn late. Obviously playing the Cub first and connecting with it is the best we could do, but we can also expect removal from our opponent, and in blue-red it's mostly gonna be damage based. So if we play our other energy creatures first, we could have enough energy to save the Cub from potential burn spell. So I kind of like playing out the Brawler first here. And if our opponent wants to use the Vial next turn on it, that's also fine. And then next turn we have the option of Rhino or Tracker, probably Rhino. Could also go Cub plus Rampager, possibly. As we see a draw 2 from the opponent. But now they don't have mana to stop our Brawler from attacking. If we attack with the Brawler, that's probably best. Could also play out the Harvester. That gives us some more energy, and then next turn we might be able to go Tracker, Land plus Greenbelt Rampager, in which case now we should play the Swamp. So yeah, I do like diversifying our threats a little bit. So let's play the Harvester and hit for 4. Alright, so let's see if our opponent found their Sphinx's Tutelage or if they're up to something else. Yep, Fevered Visions strongly indicates a Tutelage deck. So we will be drawing extra cards, which we don't mind. Just need to keep applying as much pressure as possible. Which I think means playing Tracker plus Rampager here. Get a Tracker going. Play the Rampager, suck up 2 energy, and I think we're just going to use our remaining energy to pump up the Brawler rather than gain life, since I don't think this matchup is gonna come down to our life total. Unless their opponent's playing maybe a blue-red burn deck, but usually you don't see Alchemist's Vial in blue-red burn decks. So let's just hit for 7, opponent down to 9, get to draw a card. We do lose 2, since we do have 4 or more cards in hand, but next turn we should be able to deploy most of our hand. Just goes to show that curving out nicely is usually good enough to beat most tutelage draws. As we see, Collective Defiance can take out the Tracker, that's fine. And yeah, our opponent's actually just dead on board here. Pretty easy turn 5 kill. Opponent did miss a land drop, so that might also have helped. Crew the Harvester. And attack for exactly 9. Opponent doesn't have mana to use the Vial. So that's gonna do it. Alright, on to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which is a little awkward with these two Evolving Wilds, so I think we can do better, even though the spells in our hand, of course, are pretty good. Alright, this'll do. We have a turn 1 Rampager, turn 2 actually cast the Rampager, turn 3 Tracker, and Aether Hub also not a bad one. So next turn, no real reason to play the Aether Hub yet, so probably just gonna play another Forest or the Woodland Cemetery and play the Rampager twice. And Gifted Aetherborn, kind of annoying against our Rampager. Can decide to trade or maybe Fatal Push the Aetherborn later. Does mean that we don't get to curve out perfectly if we want to Fatal Push. So we'll probably end up trading the Rampager for the Aetherborn. But given that our hand is pretty nice for the late game here with Tracker and 2 5-drops, I think trading to play a longer game is probably fine. So let's see if our opponent has their own removal spell, or if they're just going to offer the trade here. I will accept reluctantly. And they read the bones, so our opponent also happy to play a longer game here, as they pay 2 life to draw 2 and scry 2. Alright, Evolving Wilds is interesting. I kind of want to play out the Tracker, of course, but that means we're not going to get any value out of it. So it's probably correct to say go, since we don't have a turn 4 play lined up anyways, so might as well go Tracker Evolving Wilds next turn. Get ourselves 2 clues. If this is going to be a long grindy game, then I would rather get those clues, as our opponent has their own Tracker plus Evolving Wilds combo, and can't Fatal Push a 3-drop here, unfortunately, since we don't have Revolt enabled. So that's a little awkward. We could Evolving Wilds to enable Revolt and then also play the Longtusk Cub now, but then we're giving up that card advantage from the Tracker. If we just play Tracker, go Evolving Wilds and sack it, then we are letting our opponent keep their Tracker, which could generate a ton more clues. But we do still have this Ob Nixilis that can deal with it next turn, so maybe playing our own Tracker plus Evolving Wilds is fine. And I will sack it now, since we're gonna do that no matter what, since we need to play our 5-drop next turn. No need to keep our Evolving Wilds around for enabling Revolt, and here probably actually want to get a Swamp rather than the Mountain. Also keep secret that we are playing red, and we need double black for Ob Nixilis, so I don't want to waste any precious energy. And if we do top deck Harness Lightning or Unlicensed Disintegration, then we can still cast it off of the Aether Hub. Alright, retreat to Kazandu. That's where the opponent kind of lost me. Putting a counter on the Tracker, getting another clue. Alright, that's all fine. So are they playing kind of a rampy deck? Definitely taking it here, since their opponent can still sack a clue to draw a card. But next turn we will be playing Ob Nixilis, which will take care of our opponent's only threat. And we'll have our Tracker still going. So yeah, I don't think this retreat is gonna do a whole lot, but I might be wrong. Get another clue, play Ob Nixilis, and get that Tracker out of there. And then hit for 3. Next turn we have a few options. If our opponent plays another 4-drop, we can potentially sack a clue, Fatal Push plus Longtusk Cub. If they play a smaller creature, we can Fatal Push plus Gearhulk, or we can just sack a bunch of clues. Gearhulk, however, is not something we can cover with Fatal Push, since it's a 5-drop. And the land makes it a 9/9, so now we actually can't block it with our own Gearhulk. Found Evolving Wilds, also a Revolt enabler. I guess it makes 2 clues. Probably want to draw the card first. Give us a little bit more information. Found a Bristling Hydra, which could be a nice recipient for all those +1/+1 counters. But our opponent next turn is pretty much forced to attack Ob Nixilis, otherwise we can just kill their Gearhulk. I actually don't mind going Hydra plus Cub here, as that potentially gives us blockers for the Gearhulk should our opponent not have anything to interact, and that way we can also spread around our counters a bit better with our own Gearhulk. Another retreat, another counter on the Gearhulk. And let's see if they're going after Ob Nixilis here. They are. So yeah, at this point we would basically have to put all our creatures in front and use a bunch of energy to trade. And if our opponent has any interaction, that's bad for us. So I think we just have to let this one happen, unfortunately. So we're basically trying to race here with the creatures we have in play and the Gearhulk. Brawler's also not bad, so let's start by playing the wilds, getting some more clues. And this time we can get the mountain. It's our last basic. And I think we probably want to play the Gearhulk and put a bunch of counters on the Hydra, especially since that one can get hexproof, and might as well keep up our black mana. So yeah, I think it's probably best to put all the counters on the Hydra and move to combat. Attack with everyone. And we're hitting for 13, and I don't think our opponent will be able to kill us even if they remove our Gearhulk. Not gonna use any energy since we want to keep up the hexproof from the Hydra. And say go. Opponent with a Pulse of Murasa, alright. So they can get back their tracker. Gain 6. And another Pulse of Murasa, alright. Getting back the Aetherborn. So their opponent back up to 16. We do have Fatal Push for both the tracker or the Aetherborn, since we can enable Revolt with our clues. So we will be taking 10 here, I believe, and hopefully our opponent doesn't have any weird pump spell. And we basically have to come up with 16 damage next turn, or a bunch of removal spells off of these clues. Gifted Aetherborn. They do play the tracker, that's fine. And a land to gain 2 life and get a clue. And a Liliana. Alright, so our opponents emptied their hand here. Shrinking our cub, that's fine. So for mana efficiency's sake, I'm pretty sure we're gonna end up killing the Aetherborn here no matter what, so might as well do it now. So cub is now an 0-1. So can we find some removal spells? Alright. Push certainly helps, so right now we have 12 plus 4. So I think we might be able to get there. And Harness Lightning definitely will help. So we can Fatal Push the tracker. Now we have 16 plus a bunch more. So yeah, this is more than enough to kill our opponent here. And the most efficient spot to put all our energy is the Cub, since that's 2 energy for 1 power, while the Hydra is 3 energy for 1 power. So let's send in everyone at our opponent. And make sure to pump our Cub a couple times. So actually a pretty close game. but I don't think that retreat to Kazandu did our opponent any favors. So this should be enough. Yep, that's 20. Alright, sweet. I want to thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this gameplay. And as always, have a nice day.